Look at the scoreboard. These athletes are from a country of 23 million people, their own passport, their own army, their own elections, 8 of them since 1996, all peaceful. But on this scoreboard, their country isn't here. The flag they're allowed to wave, not their flag. The anthem that plays when they win, not their anthem.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you can, please stand for the anthem of Chinese Taipei.
Even the name, Chinese Taipei, is a phrase they had to invent in 1981, specifically so nobody would get angry. This isn't a clerical error, it's the most carefully maintained lie in modern diplomacy. 12 countries officially recognize Taiwan as a country. The other 180 either look the other way or deny it out loud. Because if anyone admits a truth, that Taiwan is a country, the most dangerous war on the planet starts the next morning. So how do we get here? You have to understand a system, a 75-year-old machine, 3 players, 3 incentives, 1 shared rule. Nobody says what they actually want out loud. Part 1. The Machine. 1949. Mao wins the mainland. The nationalists lose. They don't surrender. They move. 2 million people, the Air Force, the Gold Reserves, the Imperial Art Collection, 100 miles east, to Taiwan. 3 weeks, the largest organized retreat in modern history. And then, they refused to call it a retreat. For 30 years, the nationalists insisted they were still the real government of China. The mainland was just temporarily lost. Official Taiwanese maps include Mongolia in the whole of mainland China, well into the 1990s. The world played along. 1971, the UN votes. Taiwan walks out before they can be voted out. Beijing takes a seat. 1972, Nixon flies to China. The handshake breaks 25 years of silence. 1979, Washington flips. America severs formal relations with Taiwan and recognizes the People's Republic as the only government of China. But, and this is where the machine got its trick, the United States never actually agreed that Taiwan was part of China. It just said, watch this word, it acknowledged that Beijing said so. Acknowledge, not accept, not agree. One word, deliberately chosen. That word has been holding up the entire Pacific Ocean for 47 years. The same year Washington flipped, Congress quietly passed the Taiwan Relations Act. It committed the US to keep arming Taiwan and to treat any non-peaceful change to its status as a grave concern. So America recognized Beijing with the front door and kept defending Taiwan through the back door, but at once, on purpose. This is a trick. Diplomats call it strategic ambiguity. What it actually is, a system where everyone agrees to lie politely, because the truth would cost more than the lie. Watch the incentive loop. Beijing can't admit Taiwan as a country. The entire Communist Party's legitimacy since 1949 has rested on the promise of national unification. Letting Taiwan go means letting China's century of humiliation narrative collapse. So Beijing has to threaten war, forever. The threat is a legitimacy. Taipei can't declare independence. The moment they do, Beijing has to invade or look weak in front of 1.4 billion people. So Taipei stays vague, forever. A country that doesn't quite say it's a country. Washington can't pick a side. Picking Taipei means war with China. Picking Beijing means losing the entire Pacific Rim. So America sells weapons to the status quo, trades with a threat to the status quo, and changes the subject. 3 incentive loops, 1 machine. Each player locked in a position they can't move from, because moving costs more than staying. In 1992, the machine even got a name. Negotiators from both sides met in Hong Kong and supposedly agreed there is one China. But crucially, they did not say which one. Taipei thinks it means each side defines China for itself. Beijing thinks it means there's one China and they are it. Both sides went home and told their voters they won. That agreement, to be vague, is still cited today, 34 years later, by people who have never agreed on what it means. The machine ran without major breakdown for 47 years. Now ask the question every engineer learns to ask. What happens when one of its gears starts to wear out? Part 2. The crack. In 2026, The gear that holds the whole machine together is cracking because of something that didn't exist in 1979, a chip the size of your fingernail. This is TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. It makes roughly 90% of the most advanced computer chips on Earth, the sub-7 nanometer processors that everything cutting edge depends on. Nobody is close. Samsung is a distant second. Intel is years behind and missing deadlines. The most advanced chips are mostly made in one industrial cluster in one city called Hsinchu, about an hour south of Taipei. Your iPhone runs on a TSMC chip. The model answering your prompts runs on a TSMC chip. The F-35 fighter jet runs on a TSMC chip. If TSMC stops shipping for 90 days, the global economy doesn't slow down. It seizes. Taiwan calls this its silicone shield. Here's a metaphor that actually works. Taiwan is a hostage that kidnappers can't shoot because a hostage is also the only person on Earth who knows a safe combination. And in 2026, you'll hear that the shield is melting. TSMC is building 12 fabs in Arizona, a $165 billion project, the largest foreign direct investment in U.S. history. More fabs in Kunamoto, Japan, more in Dresden, Germany. But this is where the analysis usually gets sloppy. The shield isn't melting. The math is changing. Here's what almost nobody outside the industry understands. Arizona's making chips that are, deliberately, one generation behind what Taiwan makes at home. The N2 process node, the most advanced silicone being mass-produced anywhere on Earth, stays in Taiwan. The R&D that designs the next node after that stays in Taiwan. And the piece that matters most for AI, a packaging technology called COWOS, chip on wafer on substrate, stays in Taiwan. Why does COWOS matter? Because every NVIDIA AI accelerator on the planet, the chips training every frontier model, depends on COWOS to stack the silicone and the memory together. Without that packaging, you don't have an H100, you don't have a B200, you don't have an AI industry as it currently exists. TSMC's COWOS capacity is the single tightest bottleneck in artificial intelligence, and it sits in Taiwan. So the shield isn't melting, it's getting narrower. And the narrow part is the part that bleeds most if it's cut. But here is the tension. Every fab built abroad makes a less critical chip fungible. The base layer of the world economy starts to be makeable elsewhere, which means if Beijing ever moves, the global incentive to defend Taiwan increasingly comes down to one question: how badly do you need this year's AI chip right now before a substitute can spin up in 3 to 5 years? That window is shrinking, and Beijing is watching the calendar. Part 3. The Siege. December 2025, the largest live fire drills around Taiwan in over a year. Rockets, naval encirclement, more than 90 aircraft in a single day. Chinese warships sailing inside the median line of the strait, a line both sides used to respect for decades. President Lai Ching-te, one of the pro-sovereignty Democratic Progressive Party, call it expansionist ambition. Beijing's Taiwan Affair Office called Lai a saboteur of peace, a troublemaker, and a warmonger. Lai's answer, January 2026, was historic. Taiwan would push defense spending to 5% of GDP, phased in across 8 years. Sit with what that number actually means. 5% of GDP is higher than every NATO member, higher than South Korea, higher than Israel in peacetime. For a society of 23 million people, most of whom have spent their entire adult lives in peace, with a free market economy and young democracy, it is the kind of spending normally seen only by countries already at war. In practical terms, it means expanding mandatory conscription, which Taiwan already lengthened to 12 months in 2024. It means redirecting billions away from healthcare, infrastructure, pensions, every other priority a normal country has. It means buying anti-ship missiles by the thousand, scaling domestic drone production from artisanal volumes to industrial ones, hardening every power substation, every water plant, every undersea cable landing point. It means a small, prosperous, aging island reorganizing its entire economy around the assumption that it might have to fight a country 60 times its size. And the strategy isn't to win a conventional war. It can't. The strategy is what Taiwanese planners call the porcupine. make an invasion so painful, so slow, so expensive in PLA lives and equipment that Beijing's leadership concludes the cost is unbearable before they're committed. Porcupines don't kill the bear. They make eating the porcupine cost more than the meal it's worth. But, and here's a thing that should make your spine cold. This isn't war. Not yet. It's something the analysts call the gray zone. Pressure that stays just below the line that would force America to act. Don't picture Russ on a hinge. That's too passive. Picture this, a siege. The kind that breaks cities slowly without ever firing a shot at the walls. Chinese Coast Guard ships ramming Taiwanese fishing boats near the outlying Kinmen Islands. Undersea internet cables severed by Chinese flagged ships dragging anchor over them. Taiwan has lost dozens of cable cuts in the past 2 years alone. Surveillance balloons drifting across Taiwanese airspace. Cyber intrusions probing the power grid. Daily incursions by fighter jets crossing the median line, until that line, in 2026, effectively no longer exists. This is not a slowdown. It's acceleration of a different kind. The siege tightens by the week. Every cable cut tests Taiwan's resilience. Every drill rehearses an actual blockade. Every gray zone incident establishes a new normal, then a newer one. The pressure is invisible from satellite. It's only visible if you watch a trend line. And here's a genius in the menace of the design. No single day ever looks like the day. There's no Pearl Harbor moment, no clear casus belli for Washington to respond to. Just a hand on a throat, tightening so slowly that nobody can prove it's tightening. This is a race. Taiwan is racing to build a defense so dense the bear gives up. Beijing is racing to squeeze hard enough that Taiwan capitulates before the bear has to bite. Whichever race finishes first writes the next 50 years of the Pacific. Part 4. The Trap. So why hasn't the war already come? 3 reasons, all of them about cost. First, economic. China is hooked on the global trade that Taiwanese chips run through. The US is hooked on those chips. Taiwan is hooked on selling them. Mutually assured economic destruction, denominated in semiconductors. A blockade of Taiwan would likely tip the world into a depression worse than 2008 inside a single month. Second, military. Invading Taiwan is one of the hardest operations ever attempted. The strait is 100 miles wide. Only 2 short weather windows a year, April and October, are calm enough to move troops across. D-Day was 20 miles, with total Allied air superiority against a defender with no anti-ship missiles. Taiwan has thousands. Taiwan has mountains down the spine of the island. Most credible war games suggest a Chinese invasion would cost a PLA half its surface fleet in the first week. Third, and this is the one Beijing didn't see coming, time. In 1992, about 17% of Taiwanese identified as Taiwanese only, not Chinese, not both, just Taiwanese. By 2024, that number was over 60%. Among people under 30, close to 3/4. The longer Beijing waits, the less Chinese Taiwan feels. A whole generation has grown up that has never lived under Beijing. They voted in 8 free elections. They watched what happened in Hong Kong in 2020 when Beijing rolled in the national security law and ended one country, 2 systems inside a single year. They saw the model Beijing was offering them in real time on a city that already spoke Cantonese and Mandarin. They don't want that model. This is a trap Beijing built for itself. The one China claim depends on Taiwan eventually wanting to come home. Every year, fewer Taiwanese want to, which means every year, the only way left to enforce one China is force. One China was always supposed to be a holding pattern, a temporary fiction, useful until reality caught up with the slogan. The bet was that economic integration, family ties, shared language and culture would slowly pull Taiwan into Beijing's orbit. That history would quietly do the work that politics couldn't. In 2026, the opposite is happening. The slogan is getting older. The country it claims is getting younger. The machine that held the Pacific together for 47 years is grinding against itself. Maybe the strait stays frozen for 50 more years. Maybe Xi Jinping decides his window's closing and forces a question before the demographics get worse. Maybe an Arizona fab tips the silicon balance. Or maybe COWOS doesn't, and Taiwan stays indispensable until the next decade. Maybe one drill, one accident, one election speech doesn't get walked back in time. The real question isn't whether one China survives. It's whether anyone in Beijing, in Taipei, in Washington still believes the lie hard enough to keep the machine running. Because every machine, eventually, runs out of the thing that made it move. Tell me in the comments.